How's it going, guys? Welcome back to the Patriot DIY channel. In this video, I'm going to show you how to build a basic 2x4 stud wall. Alright guys, now obviously we have a pre-existing attic space here that we're going to be finishing, and the first part of that process is building some new partition walls to divide up the space. Now, like I've told you guys before, I am not a contractor. This is not what I do for a living, but I do know how to build a basic stud wall. So that's what I'm going to be showing you guys today. We're going to go step by step. We're going to talk about how to lay it out, how to assemble it, and then how to raise it and attach it. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, guys, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below, hit that notification bell, and give us a thumbs up. Alright guys, so we're going to be building a wall in between these existing beams. Now these existing beams are very old and nothing up here is really square or plumb or anything like that. Now your basic stud wall is going to have a few main components. You're going to have a bottom plate, a top plate, and depending on your application, a double top plate. The wall we're going to be building today is going to have a double top plate. Now I'm not really sure that it's necessary because it's not a load bearing wall or anything like that, but having a double top plate is really good for connecting two sections of wall, and I just want to show you guys those extra steps for a double top plate, so that's what we're going to be doing. And your last component is your vertical studs. Now starting out, the first thing we need to do is get a measurement for the length of our wall. So that's going to be the length of our bottom and top plates. So I have 136.5. I'm going to give myself a little bit of wiggle room there just because I know that these beams are not uniform. So let's get over here and start cutting some wood. We're working with 8-foot 2x4s, so we're going to be building this wall in two sections, one 8-foot section and another shorter section. Right now we're cutting down the top and bottom plates for our shorter section of wall. We're just going to go ahead and measure and mark one board and then extend that mark across all three with our speed square. And one tip to help make sure you're getting straight cuts with a circular saw is to use your speed square as a guide to make sure you're getting a nice straight cut all the way through that board. Now we're ready to mark our stud location. So we're going to stack all three of our plates side by side, and every wall is going to start with a stud on the end. So we're going to go ahead and mark that first one on the end, and then we're going to be building this wall with 16-inch on center stud spacing. What that means is you'll have 16 inches from the center of one stud to the center of the next stud in your wall. This is important because things like sheetrock and plywood come in 4-foot sections, so you can make sure those materials are always going to line up with a stud. Now if you look on your tape measure, you may have markings on your tape measure to help you out with finding 16-inch on center measurements. If you look here on mine, every 16 inches is marked in red just to help you out with that. Now for our first stud, we're going to be measuring from the edge of the board, and we're going to go ahead and mark that stud location, but we're not going to mark right at 16 inches because that's the center of the stud. We're going to measure back 3/4 of an inch and then forward 3/4 of an inch, and that's going to give us the exact location of our stud. And then we'll move on down the line, marking each stud location in the same way. Then we'll use our speed square to extend that mark across all three boards. And we move on to our shorter section of wall. We want to continue that 16-inch on center spacing from the previous wall. So we will have a 2x4 on the end to connect the two walls together, but to mark the location of the first stud on that wall, we're going to be measuring from the center of the last stud on our previous wall. Now we need to figure out our stud height, and the easiest way to do that is to go ahead and lay your top and bottom plates stacked on top of each other in place exactly where your wall is going to go. and then we're going to measure up from there to get our stud height. Now you're going to want to measure in a few places along your wall, and you're going to want to take the shortest measurement for your stud height. That way you don't run into any issues with your wall not fitting when you go to stand it up in place. Now we're ready for our layout. Now there's really two different ways to build a wall in an existing structure like this. You can build it in place, secure your bottom plate and your top plate, and then toenail in your studs. But the way I prefer to do it is laying on the floor, and then we stand up the whole wall all together. So that's the way we're going to do this. Now to lay this out, remember we've already marked our stud spacing on all these plates, and we want to maintain the orientation of these in our layout. So I'm just going to take my two top plates, I'm move them straight this way. I'm going to set the double top plate aside for now. Then we're going to lay them on end and put our studs in place where we have pre-marked. Now you could certainly do this with hammer and nail, but we're going to be using our DeWalt nail gun to fasten these together. And we're just going to go down the line, making sure they line up properly. And we're going to put 2 nails in each side. Since we are using the nail gun, you want to be extra careful that you keep your hand back just in case one of those nails was to shoot up through the side. Now that I got my 2 sections of wall built, I'm just going to move them together, get them flush on the ends, and just nail them together. Now for our second top plate, since we have 2 sections of wall, we have a smaller and a longer, and we have a transition right here. Instead of putting my smaller top plate here right on top of my small section of wall, what I'm going to do is I'm going to overlap, put my longer top plate on this end so it strengthens this joint here, and my smaller top plate on that end. The same thing would be true if you were making corners. You'd want your top plates to overlap just to strengthen that joint. So I'm just going to put these in place, butt them up flush, and nail them in. One thing you want to think about while you're nailing this is when your plumbers and electricians and stuff like that come in, they're going to be putting all their stuff in between the studs, and you don't want them running into a nail. So when you're nailing in double top plates and things like that, you want to try to orient your nails right above the studs where you already have nails. That way it's not going to interfere with anybody else's work. Now at this point, if you haven't done it yet, you're going to want to go ahead and mark the location for the bottom of your wall. I already have mine marked out, and what I'm going to do to make sure I get everything nice and straight, so I'm going to pull out a chalk line, hold it nice and tight on my marks, and now we have a nice straight line to line our wall up to. I'm not too concerned about the top just yet. I'm just going to be using a level to level that up later. Now we're ready to stand our wall up. Now I'm just going to be using my hammer to knock it into place and line it up with our chalk line. Now I'm just going to go down the line, tapping it into place to make sure the bottom lines up with our chalk line, and then nailing it down. Now I want to be careful to make sure I'm nailing into the floor joist, and since we have bare subfloor, I can see where the plywood is nailed in, so I know where my joists are. So I'm just going to make sure I put 2 screws in each joist going down the line. Now we need to make sure the wall is straight and plumb. And we're gonna do that in 2 different places. First, I'm gonna check to make sure that this 2x4 is straight up and down. If it's not, then I can put some shims in to make sure that the wall is nice and straight this way. Then we're gonna check this way and see if we need to tap the top of that wall over. And we do. So what I'm gonna do is just hold my 6-foot level up here, and I'm going to tap that over until it's good and plumb, and then we're going to nail it in at the top. Now if you just have a single top plate, you can nail straight through the bottom of it into your ceiling joist or your beam or whatever you have there. But for mine, I'm just going to be toe nailing in from both sides into this top beam. I'm going to check that all the way down just to make sure we don't have any waving in our wall. That'll be super noticeable once they start putting sheetrock on. So I'm going to check each stud going down before I nail it in at the top just to make sure it's good and plumb. Now sometimes those nails that are toe nailed in, if you had to toe nail it, stick out just a little bit. So we're going to go back and tap those flush. Then I'm also going to go back and throw some nails in here to nail it to our side beams. When you're framing in an existing structure like this, especially one with these old type beams, you're subject to have gaps, and I do have some gaps here. Now before I nail this in, I'm going to put some shims in there just to shim it up and fill that gap. You're going to want to put them in from both sides evenly and just tap them in until they're good and snug, and then you can just snap off the excess or cut it off. I did want to mention one additional step that we didn't do here, but a lot of times you could put some blocking in between your 2x4s just to make it a little more sturdy. Typically those are done at around 4 foot, and sometimes you'll see guys try to put a straight line of blocks at 4 foot, and you have to kind of toe nail them in, and that can be a pain in the butt. What I would do instead, while you're on the floor framing up your wall, I'd cut your block and I'd put them in at 4.5 foot and 3.5 foot. That way you have plenty of room to work, and you can just alternate as you go down the wall. You got plenty of room to nail those in without having to toe nail them in. Now structurally, that type of blocking was not necessary for this wall, but if you did choose to put blocking in between your studs, that's the way I'd do it. All right guys, that's pretty much it for your standard 2x4 stud wall. Again, like I said, I'm definitely not a professional framer or anything like that, so if you guys have any extra tips or tricks, make sure you let us know in the comment section below. That'll help us all out. But hopefully this video helped you out at least understanding the basics of framing a wall. Now I have a lot more work to do up here, so I'll probably make this a series. We'll probably have another video on how to frame up a door and things like that. So if you haven't done it yet, guys, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below, hit that notification bell, and give us a thumbs up. And as always, if you're interested in any of the tools that we used in this video today, I will have links to those in the description so you can get them for yourself. Thanks for watching, guys. Please like, share, and subscribe. And we'll see you next time.